Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, welcome to Child Psychology Module number 13, and that has to do with the intellectual development of children as we are talking about the age group from birth all the way to age 19. Let's get into the module number 13, which is the intellectual development. In this module, what we will be covering is the brain development and intelligence, how to enhance intellectual development, the various childhood intelligence concepts, understanding the intellectual development of the children in the middle age as well as in the late childhood age. So first of all, in introduction, the intellectual development is another type of development that children go through. It is closely related to cognitive development. So the first year of a child's life is filled with growth, and the brain goes through several periods in which effectively stimulate their brain, and which is required for proper development. The brain development, we know that the brain development begins in the womb. We've studied that in the previous modules, and it continues to develop throughout childhood and adolescence. So the brain development of an infant is the key to their intellectual development. During the first year of their life, the input that the brain receives, such as the verbal language, the visual stimuli, is necessary for the brain growth. So without this, the child's skill, such as speaking ability or vision, can become impaired. It is the responsibility of the caregivers or the parents to ensure that they are pushing the brain towards a healthy development process. One way to do this is to allow the infant to explore their world. So intellectual development from birth to 6 months. One of the hallmarks of a baby is their cry. Babies cry for many reasons, including when they are in pain or hungry. Babies also coo and babble. So when babies do this, it shows that the child is gaining the skills that they require for communication later in life. So that's a good sign when baby cries. Now, that doesn't mean we just make them cry, but that's based on, like, we mentioned that it is basically their needs of gaining, either they're in pain or they're hungry and so on and so forth. Intellectual development from 7 to 12 months. As a child enters the period between 7 and 12 months, they will start communicating with simple words such as mama, baba, papa, but they can't associate meanings with the words at this point, right? Even if they are saying or communicating these words, but remember, there's no association between the words and the meanings. So they will also do things like they wave their hands, for example, bye bye. Children also learn about the effect and cause and effect, and they may also and may not also repeat actions that elicit a certain response. So for instance, they might shake a rattle and like the noise, so they will keep shaking the rattle. So rattling a toy is one way of, they may or they may not. They may like the sound to do it, and they may not like the sound to do it. So they might touch something hot, realize that it hurts, and then never touch the object again. So at this point, infants will have also understand that just because they cannot see an object, that does not mean that object does not exist. They will also still explore the world by putting things in their mouth. These are all the things that further show that intellectual development is occurring. Now, activities to promote intellectual development. So at this age, a parent or a caregiver can start promoting the intellectual development of a child, and responsive caregiving is ideal for stimulating a child's brain. development. Activities such as rocking, holding, singing to the baby, it shows love and warmth. So reading to baby will also help in terms of the development, such as the development of languages, and giving the child a bright toy, for example, giving a child some sort of toys that are bright in their outlook. That also promotes visual stimulation. And if the toy or the toys are placed outside of the child's reach, they will also get physical stimulation. So they will kind of look for the toy and trying to chase it. Another activity that can promote intellectual development in children of this age is to place a mirror in front of them. Although they can't really recognize the person in the mirror, that's him or her, although they will enjoy this experience, and that's also a good stimulation for them. Older infant, however, begin to start recognizing themselves. Musical toys, for example, the toys that make sound are excellent for auditory feedback. And these toys also, for example, cement the lessons of cause and effect. Because if you notice that when they touch a toy or press a button on a toy, they'll be able to hear a sound. So that's sort of they realize that I will push this button on that book, and the book will respond back. So that's the cause and effect. Books with different textures also promote intellectual development, and as it promotes exploration as well, which is essential for the brain development, and ultimately helps help infant reach their developmental milestones. So intellectual development from 2 to 3 years of age. By the time the child reaches the age of 2 to 3, they will have a large expansion when it comes to their intelligence. So at this point, at the age of between the 2 to 3, at this point, they are expanding their intellect by playing and exploring. But remember, instead of giving a toy or an opportunity by mom or dad, right? This is all self-directed. So that's just the child has that direction to work with, without the intervention of the parents. Language is also rapidly expanding in these toddler years, and children are able to hold short conversation with adults. They can also spot similarity between two objects, and they can use pronouns correctly. By the time child turn, for example, 3, they should be grouping items together and know who they are, and can imitate adults both in and out of the play. Activities that to promote intellectual development. Adults can also promote intellectual development by giving the child space to explore, and offering toys that are age appropriate for them to play with. Again and again, I think one thing you heard from me and probably throughout this course is the age appropriate things. And I think that's very important. Something in their access that's not age appropriate could potentially be harmful for them and not good for their intellectual or their emotional development. So finally, ensuring that the child has a healthy diet and good nutrition is imperative to the development of language. One of the factors, the intellectual development, is another type of growth that children experience. It is similar to cognitive development, though it is not as noticeable as a child's physical or emotional growth. So intellectual development from 3 to 7 years old. So this time between 3 years and 7 years old is often fascinating for parents and caregivers. as they see these children as starting to actually get it, right? This age, they will begin to notice that the children are now beginning to get the information, So the most often happens in the subjects of time, speech, reading, and reasoning. So when you see this age, you begin to notice the children are begin to get the time, the speech, the reasoning, and the reading. Let's get into each. So as I mentioned, the concept of time. So the children from the age group of 3 to 7 make great strides when it comes to their intellectual development. And one of the concepts they must learn is the concept of time. As a 3 years old, the concept of past and future is understood, but limited, right? So they do understand what's now and what's before and what's after, but it's limited to, I can tell you what that is. So for example, events that occur in the past, it could be last week, but that would be yesterday. And what's happening next week, perhaps, is considered to be tomorrow. So the children will also understand morning, afternoon, and night, and they will continue to develop throughout their childhood. The concept of speech. So the growth of vocabulary and the ability to communicate with others is one of the most noticeable changes that the child goes through between the age of 3 and 7. The 3 years old will often still speak in simple sentences and can even use words that people outside of their family don't understand. By the time they are 4 years old, they can have conversation with both adults and as well as with their peers, and can tell stories and speak in longer, a little bit longer sentences. Over the next few years, the speech ability continues to improve. And by the time they are 7, they should be able to express themselves quite well, and they understand the stories and get quite of the details from those stories. The concept of reading. So when a child is 3 years old, they will likely to have favorite book, right? And then they want the parents to read the book, and then not only read the book, there will be a point that they will memorize some of that book, and they will try to read the book back to the parents, right? So that's how much the concept of reading that works. One of the most important first step in the acquisition of psychological skills is the ability to discriminate between different sounds. So taking children for nature walks and listening to various environmental sound is an important part of the process. So it's really a good idea to have them go out and walk in the nature. For example, you can take them out in the morning when they're in the backyard, or perhaps into a nearby trail, to have them experience a little bit about the sounds that are outside, beyond the normal sounds that that are created in the house. For example, often people yelling, screaming, talking, all that. But I think that the other types of sound that when they get out, that's also part of their important part of their developmental process. The concept of reasoning. Reasoning is an innate ability that allows a person to utilize existing knowledge to form opinions about conceivable outcomes. So this concept dramatically increases during the years of 3 to 7. So I want you to note this down. The reasoning dramatically increases from the age of 3 to 7. And by the time a child is 7 years old, they regularly use reasoning to draw conclusions. And children can also understand that everyone perceives the world very differently, and that things are not always as they appear. Intellectual development from age 8 to 12, though intellectual development slows from between the ages of 8 to 12, that does not mean it does not still occur. In fact, that there are a number of concepts that the children discover when on the path of to intellectual development, including the following, which I'm going to mention. Number one, the concept of socialization. Between the ages of 8 and 12, right, children experience more interest in socialization, which gives them new opportunities to develop their intellect. Children also develop social concepts such as fairness, ethics, and justice, and they develop more of a sense of oneself. So this is important for intellect, and they will soon be entering into the puberty phase, and there will be questions regarding their ethics, and the ethics will be tested at that point. The concept of communication, we're talking about 7 to 12, the 8 to 12. By the time child reaches the age of 8, they are quite capable of expressing themselves verbally. A few years later, by age of 12, many of them are able to produce well thought out, intelligent writing as well. This is significant for many kids as, again, they are on the edge of adolescence age, where life gets confusing. So writing poetry or keeping a journal, which helps them cope in common, at that part of their age. The concept of character. Though many parents and caregivers believe that it is surprising, kids at this age will often find themselves having to make decisions about drugs and some of the sexual activities. Now, the decision they make, of course, often comes down to their character. So the character will come into play based on the ethics that these children have grown up with, and the confidence that they have in reasoning. So the children who have been given proper tools, such as solid self-esteem, a proper upbringing, and excellent ethical upbringing, you will find them, they will be able to make more of a right decisions than the wrong ones. And we're talking about 8 to 12 years of age. In conclusion, intellectual development is a natural process that all children go through. And as with the other forms of development we have looked at throughout this course, it is a step-by-step process. As children move through the stages of intellectual development, there are ways that the parents and caregivers can enhance this development. Folks, this is the end of our intellectual development. Congratulations for completing this session. Have a wonderful rest of the day. We will see you on the module number 14 at our next video. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon.